Good afternoon. My name is Alan Crone, and welcome to the Crone Law Firm's Facebook Live broadcast. We're coming to you this afternoon talking about racial discrimination and what if you have a racial discrimination problem at the workplace, what you might be able to do about it. Appreciate everyone joining us this afternoon. At the Crone Law Firm, we are an employment law firm, and we represent employees, executives, and entrepreneurs in any dispute or legal matter that affects their ability to make money. And certainly when you're the victim of racial discrimination in the workplace, that not only affects your ability to make a living, but also can have tremendous detrimental effects in other areas of your life, including mental anguish and pain and suffering and that sort of thing. And we'll talk a little bit about what you can do if you feel you're the victim of racial discrimination or racial harassment in the workplace. As always, we're going to structure this by answering a few questions on racial discrimination that are frequently asked questions that we receive, and we hope that this is helpful to you in evaluating whether or not you should call us or call an employment law lawyer in your area if you believe that after viewing this that you might be the victim of racial discrimination. So the first question is, what is racial discrimination? And basically that's any discrimination, in other words, an adverse employment action or harassment that's directed at someone because of their race. Sometimes that can be the color of their skin, or it could be possessing other physical traits associated with a particular race of people, whether it be African American or Eastern or American Indian. There are a number of different racial divisions, including Caucasian. And so if you possess some racial characteristics and you believe it's your race that is the reason that you've been fired or you've been demoted or you weren't hired or some other adverse employment action befell you, then you might have a racial discrimination claim. What protections do I have from racial discrimination? Well, actually, in the United States, there are a couple of different avenues you can go. One is protections under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And that particular statute provides for back pay and front pay, compensatory damages, and your attorney's fees if you can recover. You can also proceed under various state law prohibitions against racial discrimination. In Tennessee, for example, we have the Tennessee Human Rights Act, which has the similar protections to Title VII, but in addition to those elements I mentioned before, there's also no limit on those damages under the Tennessee Human Rights Act, and you can also get punitive damages under the Tennessee Human Rights Act. The third basis is a Section 1983 claim under federal law, which prevents racial discrimination, and it has similar damage elements as to the ones I just enunciated, but they have slightly different legal standards for each one of those three statutes, and so you should consult with an employment law attorney to determine whether or not you have a claim under one or all three or two, and how you should proceed. Typically, under Title VII and most state statutory schemes of this nature, you need to file some sort of administrative complaint. Under Title VII, you'd file an EEOC complaint, a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And under Tennessee state law and many other state laws, there's a state law counterpart to that. One thing to be careful about is all of those statute of limitations for those various different statutes are all different, and they all run concurrently. And so you want to make sure you're very careful in how you pursue your claims. And again, it's good to get advice and representation, if possible, from an experienced employment law attorney. The next question is, how can racial discrimination affect a person? And as I said, one very profound way that racial discrimination can protect a person is economically, financially. I've seen people who didn't get jobs they applied for that would have been a great financial benefit to their family. I've seen people being fired because of their race and having to go out and maybe file bankruptcy or have other adverse financial implications. That's only the tip of the iceberg, and that's usually the easiest to measure, because you can measure how much you would have made if you hadn't been discriminated against and show what you actually made. And that difference is what we call back pay and front pay, and that's to help ameliorate the financial ramifications of race discrimination. But more insidious is the emotional and mental anguish and loss of enjoyment of life that people suffer because they're fired wrongfully. When you're fired, not because of anything you've done, but just because of who you are, that can have a devastating effect psychologically on people. In America, many of us measure our self-worth not so much by who we are, but what we do. And when our livelihood and our professions are taken away from us because of our inclusion in a racial group, that can have tremendous detrimental effects on people's mental health. And that's not to be underestimated. And while you're pursuing your legal options, you should also be pursuing your mental health options, maybe getting some therapy or other physical care, because the stress, the frustration, the humiliation, the anger, frankly, that comes from all of that can take a tremendous toll psychologically and also physically. So that's one way. Those are many ways that racial discrimination can have a pervasive effect on the victim. The next question is, are all races protected in the workplace? And that answer is yes. No employer can make a decision about hiring, firing, promotions, discipline, or any other adverse employment action based on race. And there really are no exceptions to that. Whether it be the dominant race in this country, that would be the Caucasian or white race. You can't discriminate against someone because they're white. Similarly, you can't discriminate against someone because they're black or yellow or from a particular part of the world. You also can't discriminate against someone if they associate with someone of a different race or of a particular race. For example, if you're married to a person of a particular race and your employer doesn't like that, you're protected as a result of that. And this all goes back to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and it's a very important. Was a very important act in our country, because it really did begin to integrate our workforce. And as people began to work together, they began to understand how to prosper together and to live together. And so as a result of that, we now have a much more diverse and integrated workspace than we did, say, 40 or 50 years ago. We still have a long way to go on that. There still are people who make decisions based on race and not on merit. And one of the things we do here at the Crone Law Firm is we hold people responsible who make those kinds of decisions. It's not right, and it's certainly not good business, because as a business person, you want to hire the best person possible for the job, not the best person who fits some sort of racial stereotype. And then finally, what do I do if I'm experiencing racial discrimination? Well, that depends on much on what your particular situation is. If you work at a big company, for example, Most large companies have well-developed human resource departments and policies and procedures on how to complain about race discrimination. And if you feel that you're the victim, you should go and report it to your HR department or whoever your employer directs you to report those things to. And I know people are always concerned about that because they say to me frequently, well, I don't want to lose my job. And that is it's always a danger. It's illegal to retaliate against someone for reporting, in this case, racial discrimination or reporting any kind of illegal conduct. But sometimes you have to stand up for yourself. And there are many occasions where if you don't report it and give the company an opportunity to do the right thing, the law will not allow your claim to proceed. There are exceptions to all of that. And so one of the first things I would do if I was faced with a situation where I felt like I was being discriminated against is I would go see an experienced employment law attorney who could advise you on the best way to proceed. Another thing that you're going to have to do if you have a claim under Title VII, a federal claim, is you're going to have to report that to the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And you should have an attorney help you draft whatever filing you make with the EEOC if possible, because there are certain legal requirements and frankly certain things you want to leave out from kind of a practical advocacy standpoint, and some other things you want to put in from a practical advocacy standpoint. And a good lawyer will know how to best present your claim to be persuasive to the EEOC and to be persuasive to what other fact finder might be evaluating your claim, whether it's a court, a judge, a jury, or even the other side, their lawyer or their decision maker who's going to review your situation. You want to make sure you present your claim so that they will understand the liability that they have and want to correct the problem by settling the case with you or otherwise resolving the case with you early before everybody has to spend a lot of time and money in court. So that's the first thing you want to do is you want to report it to the right person. You want to stand up for yourself if possible. And you want to document what is going on. Keep a binder that where you keep it all in one place and maybe write down things as they happen so that you can remember it later on. Documentation is very, very important. And once you've done all of those things, then an employment law attorney can help advise you then on how to present your claim to your employer, or advise you whether or not you need to just go right to filing a lawsuit or filing an administrative claim. If you work for the government, then there are all sorts of decisions you have to make within their internal EEO process, and that's really the same whether it's a federal agency, a state agency, or a local agency. They all have their own processes, and there I really would advise you to go see a lawyer because oftentimes there are choices that you can make within those procedures, and some choices are better than others, and some choices have pros and cons, and a lawyer can kind of explain to you the pros and cons, and you can make a decision on what's the best way to go for you. I hope that the answers to these questions have been.
We've got one more question. Somebody's asking about retaliation after filing an EEOC.
All right, we have a question coming in online. My producer, Alex Reed, has relayed that, and we appreciate it. And if anybody else has any questions, we'll be glad to stay on the line. The question is, what about retaliation? Can I be retaliated against for filing a complaint? I'm not going to lie to you, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Companies retaliate all the time. People don't like it when you call them on the carpet for what they're doing wrong. But it's just as illegal to retaliate against somebody as it is to discriminate against them or harass them in the first place. So it's tough because most people would rather have a bad job than a great lawsuit because they've got to put food on their plates. And so that's something you have to wrestle with is am I going to blow the whistle on this? Am I going to call the company or my boss or whoever it is out by accusing them of being a racist? And that can be a tough thing. It can be an emotional thing, and people don't respond well to it. What I tell many of my clients is the worst thing that the employer can do to you is fire you. And once they've done that, they have exercised all the control and dominion they can over you. And then the ball gets put in your court to do something about it. And frankly, it's much stronger position to be in to have a retaliation claim than just simply a discrimination claim. Again, you have your life and then you have your lawsuit, and I certainly am not telling anybody to tank their job just so they'll have a retaliation claim. But at some point, somebody has to stand up and say, this is wrong, and I don't deserve to be treated this way. And I deserve more respect and more dignity than to endure racial discrimination in this way. Particularly if it's day-to-day harassment, where the harassment goes on day after day, week after week. That takes a tremendous toll on people in and of itself. There's a slight difference between discrimination and harassment. Harassment is much more pervasive. And sometimes I've had clients who wrestled with that decision about resigning or complaining and being retaliated against. And, at the end of the day, they were happy that they complained and that they got some justice at the end of the day by standing up for themselves. That's a decision only you can make. I certainly have never talked anybody into filing a lawsuit, no matter how good their claim was, because it is a personal thing and it's a very, very difficult thing to do. And sometimes the company leaves you no choice. One thing I will urge you to do is, if you decide to do that, take some action and let's go get some justice.